All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today and welcome for our, I lost the count, it's like 40 some events that we had. Today's event is an awesome MuleSoft journey that OneMain Financial has their Omni-Channel customer notification framework. We are going to look at that one. While I'm giving some introductions, all the audience, please feel free to introduce yourself on the chat. And then we'll quickly go over some introductory stuff and we'll jump into the main agenda. So going to the next one, the agenda that we have today is a few meetup updates that I will cover. And then, like I said, we will jump into the main topic of our journey here. Meet your group leaders, those who are joining us for the first time on this event or on this group. These are the folks that help us organize this event. I am on the left. I'm Manik Magar. I am a technical architect at Avio Consulting. And then we have CEO Groyston and Angel helping us manage this group across the globe. So we have a great leadership there too. Quick guidelines. The recording of this event will be available on the event page. Usually that happens within 24 hours and you can head back to the same page where you RSVP'd and you will see the recording there. For Q&A, once this introduction is over, I'll share a link in the chat. Please use that link to ask any questions during the presentations, and we will get back to them once the presentation is over. And apart from that, for any discussions, feel free to use chat. Quick note about contributing to the network. Feel free to share on the Twitter or anywhere if this is your very first event on this group, and if you haven't joined the group, I would say please register on the group so you get notifications for our upcoming events in there. And for any feedback, you can always send a note to meetups@mulesoft.com or find any of us on social platforms, right? The important note here is a survey feedback. At the end of the event, you will usually get a survey email from platform. That survey helps us a lot. It helps us to give a feedback to our speakers. It also helps us to understand how we are doing and what we should do to serve all of you better. So please, if you can fill those feedback and surveys, we'll appreciate that, definitely. Quick thing about our upcoming events. We have two upcoming events in March. There could be more, but as of now, those two are published, and those are special events which are related to the MuleSoft Partner Kickoff, which is event happening in March. So two special meetups are going to happen in two different regions. So one is going to be APAC time zone, and the other is a combination of America and EMEA time zone. So choose whichever time works for you, and we hope to see you there, right? With that, we are at a point where I should stop my talking about introduction, but I would like then to hand it over to Erin, Ryan, and Chris to introduce themselves and take us into the journey that they have. Erin?
Thank you, Manik. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone. We are very excited to be here with you today to talk about OneMain Financial's MuleSoft journey, as well as take a close look into our Omni-Channel customer notification framework. My name is Erin Kiefner. I'm the Director of Service Enablement for OneMain Financial, also known as the MuleSoft team. My organization has 4 development teams with a total of 30 developers. We are responsible for integrations across the enterprise application network, as well as with external third-party partners. I've been with the organization for 2 years. Ryan? You're on mute.
My name is Ryan Pigford. I am a software developer manager with OneMain Financial. I report to Aaron onto the service enablement team. The originations program for our group. I'm one of the 4 development managers under MuleSoft. I've been with OneMain for about 3.5 years. I also was the only manager that we had at the beginning of our MuleSoft journey. Chris.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Spinner. I'm a software engineering manager here at OneMain. I've been with the company for close to 2 years now. I've taken part in our journey to use MuleSoft and an API-led design approach, integrating our systems and applications together. I primarily work in account servicing and customer and communication spaces. Thank you.
Thank you both. Chris, you want to go ahead and pull our deck up and we'll get started. I'm going to start us off with an overview of OneMain Financial, just to give everyone an idea of what we do, customers we service, what our organization offers. And then from there, Ryan will take us through our MuleSoft journey, and Chris will take that deep dive into the Omni-Channel customer notification framework. All right, so to start off, just a little bit about who we are. OneMain Financial is the country's largest lending exclusive financial company with more than 1,500 branches across 44 states, backed by over 100 years of experience. We offer safe, affordable, and transparent installment loans to millions of people. Our customers turn to us to meet financial needs such as debt consolidation, medical expenses, household bills, perhaps home improvements, or even auto purchases. We consistently innovate to serve our customers when, where, and how they want. What we offer really boils down to three main products. As you can see, on unsecured personal loan, this is a loan that a customer gets that doesn't require any collateral. Alternatively, we have secured personal loans, which a customer does put up collateral, such as an RV or an automobile. And then specifically a loan that is to purchase a vehicle, and that vehicle that's being purchased would then be the collateral. So that's also a secured loan that we offer to our customers. What makes us different, why our customers come to us, and why we are successful in serving so many customers across the United States is really 4 pillars. We have very clear terms. Our loans have fixed rates, fixed payments, and no prepayment fees that other lenders require. We have our local branch-based network, and that really sets us apart, giving our customers the opportunity to meet with us face-to-face or digitally, whichever they prefer. Our 100 years of experience, really working with customers to understand their financial situation and really come up with the loan option that makes the most sense and really is the best option for them, all things considered. And then the final option is something relatively new for us that we're able to offer our customers, the ability to get their money within the same day of being approved for their loan, directly deposited into their bank account. So that is a little background on OneMain. I will turn it over to Ryan to talk through our MuleSoft journey.
Thank you, Aaron. So we have been on our MuleSoft journey for about 3 years. Started in January of 2018. I think we signed our contract late December of the year before. So in January, we got MuleSoft on board. We brought in MuleSoft Professional Services and we started our journey. But what it looked like before is we had a large space of Java applications, Java APIs that we had created over the years. And a lot of you have seen this image before. It's really canned for MuleSoft, but it really shows us what we had before. We had a lot of point-to-point integrations. Those integrations were really built up over the years, and it became muddy for us. So we chose MuleSoft in order for us to be able to monitor, to be able to effectively manage, and really build a network that helps us move forward quickly, which we were unable to do or had difficulty doing as our service platform and our service really grew, right? So we had 37 Java applications, 1,000 point-to-point integrations, and we had 2 full-time developers. I was the manager of the team. So as we got started, next slide, Chris. The first year we picked a pilot application, and we started on Mule 3. MuleSoft professional services were really great to help us understand what we needed and how we were going to get started. So how do we move this point-to-point integration really to that network? We had 2 developers that we had trained through the MuleSoft training program, and we, over the course of the year, hired 2 more developers. One of the keys to our success really was at the beginning, we created that COE team. So we have a separate organization, a separate team that manages our Center for Enablement. And that really helped us understand as we got started on our journey. As we moved through the pilot, we launched our pilot, I think, in August of that year. So it took us a little while. I think we started the development in March to really understand that. You might all know in 2018, Mule 4 came out. Instead of continuing Mule 3, we made a corporate decision to move to Mule 4 instead of continuing in Mule 3. This was a difficult decision for us, but ultimately, knowing how difficult it was to move from Mule 3 to Mule 4, we didn't want to get a whole lot of APIs developed in Mule 3 before moving and making that transition. So we started those new services in Mule 4, and we had our first Mule 4 APIs in October. Over the course of that year, we started our Java conversions, moving those 1,000 APIs or endpoints that we had before into MuleSoft. And by the end of the year, I think we had 8 APIs in production. And we started, it was December of that year when we kind of made the decision to only do all new work in MuleSoft. We were comfortable enough to do that. 2019 was the year of growth. So we created the COE team in 2018. Throughout that year, they created a training program, and our technology group gave us the ability to really expand our team and grow and really focus on service enablement. So we had to train lots of developers over the course of 2019. I think we added up to, I think by the end of the year, we had about 21 developers full-time. So the ability for our COE team to create a platform for us to hire, onboard, and get them working quickly was very important to us and really showed us how well we can do this in the future. So we created a CI/CD platform in that year. It took us a while, but we were able to do it. That year, we also made the decision to do all project development in MuleSoft. Now, what that means for us is we were having a difficult time getting conversions done because of the project work and the onboarding and the growth that we were experiencing. And so in order to facilitate conversions and get us off of Java, anytime we had new work coming in that touched an old endpoint, well, we took that opportunity in that project to re-architect that solution and move it to MuleSoft. And so that's how we were pushing those through in 2019. 2019 was also, we really started to understand the architecture of what it meant to create experience to process to system and really drive towards that reusability. So one of the things that we started out in 2019, Chris is going to start with, and he's going to talk in more detail out. It's taken us over the course of a couple of years to build out, but it really shows how we've come far in our reusability and how we've created systems. Next slide, please. In 2020, 2020 was really the year of our maturity. We have a lot more as we moved through 2019 and got into 2020. Our ability to monitor and to report and to show how our services were bringing value really gained and moved into that space. So we focused a lot on that through that year. In 2020, we moved all of our major origination services. So these are the highest value to our company. Our company builds loans and makes loans. And now our APIs are creating those loans through our MuleSoft platform. That was done within 2020. One thing you'll notice on the bottom graph, that's a graph of our transaction count starting from when we created this KPI in April 2019 of our Java service transaction count compared to our MuleSoft service transaction count. And you can see over the course, as we get to 2020, that line changes and starts increasing dramatically. And this is in effect because we're moving the vast majority of our heavy hit services that create and take in applications and do those things. We're moving those into MuleSoft and getting them through. But right now, I think we have a little over 200 APIs in production. And that's been a big sell for us. I will say we have 87% of our Java APIs converted to MuleSoft. And you see there in August 2020, we really crossed over that line where now our MuleSoft implementation is really creating more value than our Java services. And we do plan on, over the next year, really take that Java service count and bring it down to 0. You see it's kind of flatline there. One of the things that we've struggled with, I think, is driving the conversions and consuming these applications. And I'll talk about that here in the next slide. So over the course of our 3 years, we've had several challenges. It's not all been roses. We've really had to figure out a lot, and we've had great help and success with our COE team, with some of the professional services that we've engaged with. But really, some of the biggest things that we've struggled with at the beginning really was technology buy-in. Having our technology organization understand why we're doing this and the need to do this was something that I don't know if we understood right at the beginning. We were told this many times, but it is difficult. There are many conversations had to help our group understand the need and the value for this. Creating those KPIs and creating some of the reporting that we've been able to do has been greatly beneficial in helping us do that. The next one that we've had challenges with is reusability and understanding that in general. As our Java services were very point-to-point, our mindset at the beginning was really, we have a project, let's create something for it. So we had to really change what that meant and look at every project differently. So just because I need to create a specific service to deliver information to the UI for this project doesn't mean that information isn't reusable. And then how do we build that so that it can be reused and it works for other consuming applications within the organization? The next one is, where does the business logic go? This one, I think, will help us really understand and it flipped the switch for us. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail here in a minute. But how to understand what goes in that process layer and what doesn't, and how do we build these to really create that network. And the two on the bottom, I think we still struggle with, and they're still challenges to us. API visibility for our consuming applications. How do they know what we have available in our select services? We use Anypoint Exchange, but there are a lot of different APIs in there, and it can get rather confusing and difficult to for our UI teams and our consumers to see what we have in our library. And so we're still working on how do we do that. And I think that's something that we're going to build upon this year and as we move forward. And then the last one is driving. The last slide, that we still have a lot of Java services being utilized. And even though our APIs are now moved to MuleSoft, how do we get them to move over and start consuming our MuleSoft services? That's been a challenge that we face, and I think we're still working on trying to figure that one out. Chris, if you go to the next slide. If we go back to the business logic, really we wanted to figure out how do we go from this point-to-point integration to this network of APIs that we can kind of configure and help our team find reusability and understand that. And first, we tried a couple approaches, and we did it one way at the beginning and found out that this was not the approach we wanted to take after failing in that application. So Chris, if you go to the next slide, the architecture we were looking at was, we have the UI, it would consume and kind of go on top of our application or our app runtime. And then we would have MuleSoft there between the backend resource. At first, that was generally how we were creating them already. And so this seemed like the way that we wanted to push MuleSoft in. And what that meant was, in our process layer, we generally had almost all of the application business logic for our servicing applications and our branch applications. This it didn't work for us. Ultimately, it caused some issues with performance, and we quickly found out that it was causing us more time to design and build, and it was very difficult for us. So we took a look and took that first application that kind of didn't work well, and looked across our teams and how does this work better. And one of the things that we did is we really started to see that MuleSoft is built for us to communicate between applications and not be that application layer API, but really to be between them and to service each of those applications to send their resources to other consumers. And so we moved that out. And what that helped us understand was that our process layer was really built for orchestration. And it sounds, when I say it now, it sounds super simple, but it was not, especially as we look at the mindset that we have. Orchestration really helps us say, I need information from this application. I need information from another application. How do we build that together to then service the broader organization for, let's say, for originations or for an application itself, and allowing our consumers to build data resources together. So that was a big light switch for us, and really drove our growth and helping us understand reusability. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Spinner. He's going to talk a little bit more about one of our reusable frameworks that we were able to build. Chris?
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Like I mentioned before, I was involved the last 2 years with our API-led design approach, and like Ryan was talking about, it's really a journey, right? So it's more than just simply adopting a tool set or platform. The most important, the one thing that will be the most critical to your success in this journey is for the entire technology team and your business partners to be on board and invested in this new approach. So that's really the only way to maximize that benefit and realize the most potential of this type of an API-led approach using MuleSoft. So I'll spend some time today walking you through our approach to digital customer notifications. It's just one of many use cases we've developed within the Anypoint platform. I'll present the business need that necessitated that development of an enterprise strategy on customer communications, and how we used Anypoint platform and evolved that architecture over the past couple of years to meet that specific demand. So OneMain currently leverage multiple vendors across different types of electronic communication channels. So the onboarding of these vendors had provided that needed capability required by the different lines of business to meet all the different demands of that particular time. So for example, a couple of vendors that we have here is, we have Venture Solutions. That's a third-party vendor we use to provide print statements and text documents and notifications via email to our customers. Zeta is another vendor that we use for email, marketing emails, and then also Axiom is an enterprise marketing division. So we focus on marketing tools for email and other media, but we also use them for different use cases for SMS text messages. And then yet we have another vendor called Twilio, which is another third-party vendor we recently developed a relationship with. And we use their programmable messaging product to send text messages and multimedia messages to our customers for our insurance and originations and operations business areas. Off to the side, we also utilize an internal SMTP service for emails. So like Ryan mentioned, as recently as 2 years ago, our vendor integrations kind of look like this for customer notifications, right? They're very point-to-point in nature. We developed applications for specific use cases and for specific vendors. There's also no clearly defined strategy for enterprise communications. And this kind of environment really allowed for individual projects and use cases to define their own architecture, resulting in a lot of duplication of effort, inconsistency when it came to our ability to provide support for those services. With an increase in throughput and volume of communications taking place between OneMain systems and our customers or lead base, we really had to step back and evaluate that landscape from more of an enterprise perspective, especially as that digital landscape expanded to include even more vendors and channels. So as the organization quickly became more digital, various initiatives had taken place across many of these lines of businesses, which drove us to define that enterprise strategy regarding how we can best design solutions that leverage reusability and then ultimately mitigate risk and ultimately save costs. As we continue to evolve our enterprise strategy, it's actually really important to understand these areas of the business and the types of ways a different customer could be engaged. So that partnership with our business was critical in understanding each of these use cases because, for example, as these use cases focused on marketing, insurance, origination, servicing, collections, we also had to consider several operational type initiatives that just support the organization in general. OneMain's entry into communication over a variety of different channels has required technology and the business to collectively look at the digital landscape and make various key decisions. Our architecture needed to be flexible enough to reach out directly to our customers in any channel as needed. So our use case, our MuleSoft integration for notifications has been evolving even over the past year. The first real use case leveraged our Twilio integration, and it was a new alert system for funding notifications. As Aaron mentioned, we had recently offered direct debit as an option to receive your funds upon booking a loan. So the notification as to whether a customer's debit funding was successful originated from an application that resides on our core systems. So that transaction is delivered onto a queue of some sorts, contains the destination phone number, and actually the contents of the message as well. So this queue is monitored by a listener implemented within an Experience API designed specifically for that application. That Experience API makes an HTTP request to a system API to send the message. With Twilio as our vendor, we developed a Twilio-specific system API that's configured with all of OneMain's account details. It's very specific to OneMain and provides a generic RESTful interface for any higher layer API that wishes to consume it for other projects. So we then converted other alerts, like our one-time passcode notifications and other use cases, for example, over to Mule from our legacy services as well. So that's kind of the continuation of that Java to Mule conversion that Ryan was talking about earlier. And even though the triggers of these transmissions were completely different business processes, we were still able to reuse that same system API to consolidate all that SMS request traffic over to Twilio. This approach to the integration really made sense at the time. It allowed for greater flexibility, greater speed, and we were getting our reusability as we hoped as we looked to stand up other use cases. So the time spent considering all the details of a vendor-specific connection is now only a one-time effort. There's no longer that need to keep building that same software for every new application. That single system API approach provided the consistency in security policy and administration. So naturally, we saw development costs and time to market reduce. At around the same time as that, a new digital customer communication initiative was just starting up. One major project in this initiative was to begin sending mobile push notifications to our customers for two major use cases. customers would have the ability to be notified when his or her billing statement is available to view in their online account portal. And the other use case at the time was to remind customers when a payment is due in 7 days. These are very convenient notifications to serve up to a customer who decides to opt into this process. OneMain chose Google's Firebase cloud messaging product, and that's a cross-platform messaging solution for those that don't know. Allows for reliable delivery of messages at no cost to native mobile applications. So whether you're on Apple or Android, it really takes care of all those details for us. And in doing so, we were challenged with internally maintaining a database of customer preferences along with each of those customers' Firebase tokens for as many devices as each customer might have. So we had to stand up an API exposed to the front-end web application that would allow a user to maintain his or her opt-in preference and also register various devices to their account. OneMain's web application actually is kind of a host of a service layer, sort of acts as a proxy between the enterprise service bus services and also OneMain's customer-facing web application. So the push notifications themselves, they're actually generated in 2 different steps. The trigger that actually creates the notification is coming from the core application or our mainframe, but it's actually orchestrated within our process layer API. So first they're created or queued on demand by the consuming system, and then that consuming system specifies the customer identifier that's supposed to be receiving that push, and the API verifies the customer that the core system is wishing to send that push notification to is actually opted in to receive the notification and has 1 or more available device tokens to send it to. That check is actually performed within the process layer using data we've retrieved in response to requests to a system layer API, which is, again, backed by a database. And if the validation checks out, customers opted in, they have a device token, the notification is then queued within the system by being inserted into that database via the system API. So it contains all the information we need to send that notification, since that step's actually handled separately. I'll actually cover a little bit more about the value of this database on another slide, but for the delivery step, which is, again, separate, we utilize a scheduler, which is external to the Mule APIs, configured to kick off a process. And that process, what it does is it retrieves and begins delivery of all of our unsent notifications for specific use cases. So it gives the business the flexibility to decide, when do I actually want these notifications delivered? At what points in the day do I want to engage my customers for these specific use cases? So the process API, when it's triggered to actually start delivering notifications, it retrieves all those unsent notifications of a certain type and provides them back to the client. Then the client can request the delivery of those notifications in either one at a time or together in batches. And so for each delivery request, the process API will retrieve that notification details from the database and request it to be sent via the Firebase system API. Again, it's a reusable vendor system API that we could potentially reuse in other use cases. The database record itself, that was the creation and that queue of that notification, is then patched to reflect the outcome of the transaction with Firebase. So what that advantage of doing that is failed transactions then remain unsent and have the ability to be retried during that next schedule interval. It was at this point where OneMain actually saw an opportunity to even further exploit reusability, not just at the system layer, as we became accustomed to doing, but at the process layer itself by developing a more flexible omni-channel notification framework, where notification events themselves are independent of the channels on which they're sent. So while our early major integrations using Mule APIs abandoned the old point-to-point approach, they all reuse the common system API, but we've now figured out that entire processes can actually be reused as well. The stack of APIs implementing this process is, like I mentioned before, is built on top of a SQL database that's used for 3 different purposes. There are tables used for configuration. So our notification events are defined first. So what is the name of this use case? What are we actually trying to do? So an example for that might include our 7-day payment reminder, a credit score change alert, delivery of the one-time passcode. So all those defined events are then associated with one or more different configurations that determine the channel. So whether you're SMS, email, push notification, and then the channel vendor itself is then specified and associated with the channel. So if you're SMS, are we sending it through Twilio? Are we sending it through Zeta, right? And so this provides the consumer of the process the flexibility to selectively target a specific channel to send an event out on, or multicast it across all that are available. So as previously mentioned, a preliminary customer preference system is also provided with this process that allows a customer to opt in or out of different categories of events. So you might have categories that are your OneMain perks, free financial tools, latest offers, account updates, etc., that the business has the flexibility to define new events and then associate them to the different preference categories that then appear as the kind of little buttons within the mobile app that you can then toggle on and off as you want to opt in or out of those specific events or categories of events. The second purpose of the database is to provide a flexible message templating system. And so that allows the business the flexibility to customize and parameterize the copy that's being sent to the end user. So rather than requiring the client system to define, like construct, and actually send the contents of, say, an entire email through the Mule API in every request, the consumer only needs to send the pieces needed that are then inserted into a predefined template associated to the event. And so then the message itself is constructed and developed in real time during the sending of that event. Now, alternatively, we might have a client trigger a separate process that begins that orchestration, dynamically collect the data needing to be inserted into a template. So the process API would then directly trigger the event with the required piece of information, keeping the upstream client interface very simple. The third major purpose for that SQL database is to record a history of all outbound notifications. And what this does is actually gives us the ability to query on specific events, maybe load certain data into our data warehouse for our marketing team to potentially query on and make informed decisions. We can query on different senders or receivers for troubleshooting or audit purposes. The other benefit this provides is for enhanced fault tolerance. So the idea is that, like I mentioned before on notification creation, the idea is that there's enough information that's captured in the database for each outbound notification, such that if anything were to go wrong, such as, I don't know, like an intermittent connectivity issue, a vendor outage, and what have you, that there's enough information to resend that notification through some kind of an automated reconciliation process later on without requiring the end user or the client application to build in any kind of retry mechanism. Those comes in handy particularly for semi-real time or even batch notifications where we can wait out any transient client system issues or downstream system issues and retry if there's a small subset of the notifications that happen to fail. Aside from this built-in fault tolerance during synchronous transmission, some vendors actually provide the capability to deliver an asynchronous status update back to OneMain. So then we're able to correlate the status of an outbound message and then notify any interested systems as necessary. So then by using this process, we essentially created a configurable notifications framework where the customer engagements can be initiated by a variety of different clients and experiences. Our core systems, our mainframe, use the different queues to trigger these notifications, while we have several experience APIs developed to listen on them, and then translate any of the data as needed prior to evoking the process. We have other experience APIs created for consumption by our mobile app and our web applications. And finally, the vendor-specific and channel-specific details are, of course, abstracted away from all of these consumers by design, so they need only be concerned with providing that bare minimum of information needed to fire off an event. there are a few key benefits we've realized when consolidating these specific integrations onto Anypoint. And this isn't specific necessarily to the notifications framework I spoke of, but more generally to our MuleSoft integrations that I'll highlight here as it's been particularly useful to us. But the Omni-Channel notifications, again, was designed to be scalable, so any number or combination of events or channels and vendors can be used as desired by the business. And then we had a vendor-specific treatment that's then delegated to system APIs as needed to encapsulate that logic and make it easier to react to changes more quickly without there being far-reaching impacts. In almost all cases, additional use cases to existing channels using existing vendors only requires configuration changes within the database, so no code changes whatsoever. And then second, as is the case with any of our Mule APIs, log aggregation takes place using our Elk stack. So our production support team been able to build out and stand up a robust suite of dashboards using our visualization tools such as Kibana and Grafana. And that's based on the data that's ingested into Elasticsearch. So as more and more business processes use Anypoint as the integration layer, we're able to capture more of that customer journey on these dashboards, allowing us to better understand the context of the transaction during troubleshooting efforts. So application programming monitoring tools such as AppDynamics can better detect anomalies the more activity that happens to be on the servers which this process runs. And so we're more likely to be able to proactively resolve issues before they adversely impact the business process. As we decide to start all of our customer engagement use cases deliberately and consistently through this process, we're even better able to tune the performance and optimize these processes as needed. And as with all of our Mule APIs, we run multiple concurrent instances of our services to ensure that we're meeting our SLAs. And finally, the introduction of each new use case is now visible and understood. The impact of adding a new use case, given the volume that we're now feeding through this framework, as you add a new use case, the impact is predictable. So it becomes a lot more easy to understand and plan for the resources that are needed ahead of project demands. All right, so what's next? Well, we've been expanding upon this architecture to more efficiently handle and correlate responses back. So as I previously mentioned, it's important that we're able to correlate an inbound request that may have been in response to or applied to an outbound event that was sent using this process. So when we look at future business requirements that leverage certain two-way channels such as SMS, and we're now considering whether it's possible that a customer will respond to the message. And what does that inbound path mean to this integration? An inbound path might be a customer replying directly to a message, or it could be a vendor system providing some kind of status update back to our system, or even a chatbot requesting additional data on the end user's behalf. So that ability to tie any inbound replies to an outbound message is absolutely crucial, being able to understand how we engage with our customers, which will hopefully lead to a higher quality experience. The caveat to all of this is still there's an organizational limitation to how we manage user preference. Future state, we might want to allow users to opt in only to certain channels, or for certain lines of business, such as originations only, or for specific notifications within that line of business, all the different combinations of preference management. There are also even more advanced criteria aside from the use case preference, but such as limiting the number of times we wish to communicate with a particular customer each day, for example, and depending on the circumstance. So we need to consider these more advanced preference use cases as we continue to build out our integration so that we can consolidate those needs rather than continue to deal with them ad hoc. And the last one is more of a best practice that we implemented, but it's also important to consider using the SLA policies such as spike control and rate limiting, just a couple examples, to regulate the traffic to the process. Our multiple consumers that are using this process operate independently of each other. And so they have the potential to load requests in such a way that might lead to undesirable behavior. So using some of the policies available within the Anypoint platform such as those related to SLA, add a layer of robustness to the APIs. And that built-in throttling then gracefully delays and queues, but guarantees delivery in those very limited situations. All right, well, that's all I had. Thank you all for your time. And Aaron, Ryan, and I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
That was awesome. Lot of lot of moving parts I could see in the diagrams, and so many components connecting to different system and data flowing, especially that configuration driven approach there, and completely decoupling your calling systems, not to worry about, okay, where should I be sending or how should I be even creating those templates. I like that, having template service separately and kind of like an enriching the content, right? So awesome there. Yeah, so we have a couple of questions. Let's go over those. Let me, maybe I'll share my screen if that is fine. So I can present the question on the screen. Okay, can everyone see the question? I hope yes. Okay, so first one is, are you using Cloud Hub for this implementation, or using an hybrid architecture for your Mule runtime, or of an infrastructure like?
I can take that one. So we currently run on-prem only. We are in the midst of standing up Cloud Hub, looking at using it as really a hybrid implementation across both on-prem as well as the cloud instance to deliver our APIs in the future.
That's nice. And if you could, maybe I'll piggyback on the question.
Sure.
If you could share, like, what type of things you would look for when you are considering to move from on-prem to Cloud Hub, like why do you think that is a good idea to move from on-prem to Cloud Hub? If you could share.
A lot of the discovery that I've personally done in that space of, when do you use cloud, when do you use on-prem, is a hybrid the best approach? Do you use one or the other? Really, a lot of my findings have shown that it's a case by case, and the hybrid approach allows you to address the case by case. So perhaps you're integrating with other systems that are in a cloud instance. You might get perhaps less latency, better performance if you have your API then deployed in the cloud as well. However, if you have an API that's needing to talk to, let's say, a mainframe application that's sitting within our data center, having that API out in the cloud perhaps would create more latency than desired. And so having that API deployed in our on-prem instance would allow those systems literally to be sitting side by side in a data center. Haven't proved that out with any of our implementations yet. So that's kind of the first thing that we would be looking to do. Having an API that we currently have on-prem that talks to an external cloud-based system, can we put that in Cloud Hub and see that it does or doesn't perform perhaps quicker than it does on-prem? So I'm very interested to kind of POC some of those things.
Yeah. No, obviously that's a lot of try and error out things there and see what works in the given use case, right? Yeah, thanks. Second was, I think, in one of the diagram, probably the first one, there was a interaction between a Mule service to AppDB. So was that like a Spring Boot service, or what was that?
So I'll take this one. When we started our journey with Mule 3, our very first pilot API was using Spring Boot in the system APIs to communicate with the database. With the complexity of that one, it was actually performed better and easier for our developers if we moved straight to the Mule connector. And so all of our other implementations to a SQL database went to the standard Mule connector for that. So we stopped using Spring and the Java connection inside of Mule. Most of our apps and direct database connections now, we've moved to an application approach. So we'll have applications own those databases, And that application is what interacts with the database, and we interact with the application rather than the database. There are certain exceptions to that. One specifically is the one we talked about because of the way we're building a reusable and configurable platform, and we have a few instances of those, but in general speaking, we are trying to communicate more with applications and rather than the database directly.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks. The very famous question. Almost every integration use case gets this one. Like, what type of CI/CD you are using, or if you could share, how do you manage your application deployments?
Chris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. For CI/CD, we actually started with the Atlassian tool suite. So we had code repositories stored in Bitbucket, and then we used Bamboo as our deployment tool. We began standardizing that process onto GitLab and Urban Code Deploy. And the reason why we were doing that actually provided us a little more flexibility in terms of building in some more static analysis tools into our process. So it allowed us to more flexibly and more proactively determine errors within our feature branches before they're promoted into even the first line environments. The other advantage it gives us is that now we're consolidating CI/CD tools as an entire organization. So GitLab Urban Code Deploy is now used on more than just Mule APIs. Java services are using it, and other areas within the enterprise are using it. So that kind of barrier to entry and knowledge gap now goes away when we're using that common pipeline.
Right. Okay, thanks. Next one is, what if one single system is required to be used for getting the different information? For example, system is having address as well as service related information. How would be layering it? Will you have a separate API process? I think it's the question is more generic, probably. And if I could say, when you choose your XAPI, PAPI, or system API, how was there any specific criteria that you was applying to decide, okay, this is what should be a single system API versus multiple system APIs? What kind of criteria you was applying?
I could take that, but I think I might punt a little bit to Ryan too. It's easy to wrap a system API around a vendor and encapsulate sort of the company specific details for those vendor integrations, because that's kind of viewed as a single abstraction layer, right? We have core systems and mainframe systems that were considered monolith, right? And we're trying to develop a reusable system API layer, and we don't want a system API sitting on top of the mainframe that's kind of this massive unmanageable API. Because now, even though MuleSoft gives you the ability to build out a reusable architecture, you could also continue to build out a monolith in MuleSoft, and that's not what we want to do either. So what we did was we tried our best to take a more domain-driven design approach to it. So even within the mainframe or those core systems, there are pockets within it that can be viewed as different domains, and you allow the system API to sort of consolidate some of those details and give the illusion of that reusable component. It isn't always possible in a lot of cases. There's some information, like you're using the example of address, that's embedded in say an account over here, but also a profile over here. So there's not one specific address system API that I can go to. And there's nothing that you can really do within a Mule system API to avoid that. But the best you can do is, through your different process layers, when you orchestrate and combine that information together, you work with your client applications to kind of understand what their needs are and sort of combine that data. Ryan, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is a question that everybody struggles with, and certainly we have as well, as we're trying to define our standards and how we approach creating system APIs as well as process APIs on our system space. Like Chris was saying, we don't want really large monolithic MuleSoft APIs. We needed to figure out a way to separate the domain and separate the space. But even inside a domain, those APIs can get large. As we look at if we tried to create an API for an account within our backend mainframe system, that could get large too. And so we're looking at how do we separate that to make it more manageable and to make it easier to develop and keep in a consistent grouping. And one of the things that's helped us out is to really define and determine how we're naming these APIs and what they mean, because that can help us really drive how we separate these into their individual components that make more sense, one, to the business. And then when we look at the process APIs, really we're looking at what processes can be created that allow us to bring information together that should be together, that may be in two different systems or two different applications, and or such with the notification system, how do we build a process that we can manage so that the experienced users don't have to deal with the back-end details and the back-end understanding of what needs to occur. And that's challenging. It's not something that we get right every time. We've had a few failures that we've had to go back and rewrite and try to understand that, but it is a difficult question to answer.
No, I agree. And it is more pressing question when you're actually migrating from a legacy system to new, where you don't have much control over the legacy's huge database, which was having like everything, right? No, thanks. The next one was probably going towards what you were saying about monolithic mule application. So the notification creation and delivery process API in that diagram was looking like it was doing so much of stuff. Templates API was integrated. It was doing a lot of dynamic routing to the channels. And if I remember, there was something to the database also to get the notification. Did you guys had a thought or anything around how much work it is doing, or is it doing a lot of things or good enough things?
Yeah,
was there
it's
anything?
a fair concern, right? As we continue to build out and support different channels and different vendors on those channels, more use cases are being fed through that single process API, and you kind of view it as this one API that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the orchestration.
Yeah.
And so what we had done over the past year is we actually, so give you a little background, so we actually split up our APIs into different business groups. So we're able to sort of compartmentalize some things within those business groups, where those business groups are on, one or several servers, being load balanced. So as we add use cases to that process, we're able to load test for it and make adjustments as needed. Going to say a cloud hosted solution will give us even more flexibility, which is sort of what we have planned on our roadmap. But yeah, I mean, it's a fair statement. I wouldn't call it a monolith, but we've also considered the notion of potentially breaking it apart into two process APIs, one dedicated for creation, which really has nothing to do with the downstream vendor itself. I mean, that delivery mechanism is what talks to the vendor APIs. And so we'd have a second process API specifically for delivery. And so we have that kind of in our back pocket that we can think about.
And I want to interject here too, Chris. And this is everything that we've done is an iterative approach. We didn't create the notification framework in one big design to do. It started small, as Chris detailed out, and as we see instances where we see APIs getting too large and that we really want to break those processes down, we start to understand that through our load tests and through our own testing, and try to figure out a way to manage that on our end to break it apart that makes more sense for us and more manageable.
That makes sense. Evolution doesn't happen overnight, right? So you just do it one step at a time. We are 1 minute almost for the end of the session, so we'll just go for a few questions there. Where do you keep your track of notifications? I think it's more of how do you manage the audit trail of system if you want to go back and see what happened in the in the system?
Right. So they're all stored in a database, and that database is used as a source for transfers to our data warehouse. And once it's in our data warehouse, you could do with that data what you wish. So you use it for auditing. You can do analysis on it from a marketing standpoint. So all the data is there for every single notification we've sent out for every end user, customer, lead, what have you. The time it was sent, how many retries it took to send that notification if there was a transient outage. So all those details are kept track there.
Okay. The next one is probably more of an organization question, if you want to take that. Did you have that situation where you started using MuleSoft and other teams are not on there and you had to talk to them and get them on board, or anything like that happened? Or everybody was fully onboarded with the MuleSoft in there? How did you evangelize MuleSoft if you had to within your other teams?
Yeah. So I think this is an ongoing opportunity for us to continue to provide educational opportunities, detailing benefits and advantages as we look at an API-led approach to designing our solutions, and it's something that we continue to work with our application development teams to help build that knowledge and understanding and confidence that utilizing MuleSoft for integrations really provides value across the organization. So I don't have a silver bullet, and if anyone does, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. Okay, we are at time, so I would like to respect everybody's time here. And there are a few more questions. Maybe I'll take down those questions and share offline if you guys want to take a attempt to answer those, and I will send it back to the audience and put it back on the channel, right? So with that, I think I will conclude this one. So thank you very much, Erin, Ryan, Chris, for this amazing journey. A lot of good stuff was there, and it will be helpful for anyone looking to have a similar journey within their organization, right? And thank you everyone for dialing us today from wherever you are. So let's hope we get back on the next event and look at some more stuff. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Ryan. Thanks.